She believed successful black men didn't exist, until the unsuccessful single father she dismissed proved her devastatingly wrong. Evelyn Hart, a polished white financier who whispered her prejudices into phone calls, had no idea the broken-down car that stranded her in the wrong neighborhood would shatter every assumption she'd built her privileged life upon. The gentleman who refused her money after fixing her problems? He was about to become her biggest problem. Because when Evelyn discovered her $1 million assessment could destroy his home and tear apart his 7-year-old son's world, she faced an impossible choice. Her glittering career, or the love that was rewriting her cold heart. But some betrayals cut so deep that even love might not be enough to heal the damage. The woman who once called him unsuccessful was about to learn that success isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in the pieces of yourself you're willing to sacrifice for what truly matters. If you're watching this incredible story of transformation and second chances, hit subscribe and tell me where in the world you're watching from. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft whisper, sealing Evie Hart inside the polished steel box that carried her down from the 23rd floor. She pressed her phone closer to her ear and let out a long breath. "I'm telling you, Sarah, I'm exhausted," she said, watching the numbers tick down. "The meeting went well, I guess. Mr. Richardson called me sharp again, but then he reminded me to stay polished for the client dinner next week." Her reflection stared back from the elevator walls. Blonde hair pulled into a perfect low bun, navy blazer crisp despite the long day, pearl earrings catching the light. At 29, Evelyn Hart looked exactly like what she was supposed to be. A rising junior partner at Hartwell & Associates, a private wealth management firm that handled old money with white gloves. What does that even mean, stay polished? Sarah's voice crackled through the phone. "You know what it means," Evie said, stepping into the marble lobby. Her heels clicked against the floor as she walked toward the revolving door. "Don't ruffle feathers. Don't ask too many questions. Smile pretty, and let the senior partners do the talking." The late afternoon sun hit her face as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Traffic crawled past in the usual rush-hour mess. She fumbled for her car keys while balancing the phone. "Speaking of ruffled feathers," Sarah said, "how's Graham? You two still on and off?" Evie's jaw tightened. Graham Pike was handsome, successful, and came from the right family. He was also the most exhausting person she'd ever dated. "Off, again. He spent our last dinner talking about his promotion and his new watch. I swear I felt like furniture." "So what's next? Dating apps?" "God, no." Evie reached her silver sedan and clicked the remote. Nothing happened. She tried again. Still nothing. The apps are full of guys who think sending a gym selfie counts as conversation. And don't get me started on the ones who can't even spell. She tried the key in the door. It turned, but when she slid behind the wheel, the engine wouldn't start. Just a clicking sound. "I need someone successful, you know?" she continued, frustration creeping into her voice. "Someone who has his life together. Is that too much to ask?" "What about that guy from the coffee shop last week? The one who asked for your number?" Evie rolled her eyes, even though Sarah couldn't see her. "You mean Marcus? He was sweet, but he delivers packages for a living. I'm not trying to be mean, but I work 60-hour weeks to afford my life. I need someone who gets that." The engine clicked again when she turned the key. "Nothing. I'm just tired of unsuccessful black guys thinking they have a shot," she said, not really thinking about the words. "Like, I respect the hustle, but I need someone on my level." She said it casually, the way she might comment on the weather. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was just how she saw things. Her world had rules, and those rules had kept her safe and successful so far. A warning light flickered on the dashboard, something about the battery. She ignored it and tried the key one more time. "Evie, you still there?" "Yeah, sorry, car trouble." She looked around the street, realizing she was in a part of town she didn't know well. The buildings were older here, with fire escapes and small front stoops. Kids played on the sidewalk while their parents sat on steps, talking and laughing. "I should go," she said. "I need to call roadside assistance." "Okay, but think about what I said. Maybe give someone different a chance." Evie ended the call and stared at her phone. The roadside assistance number rang and rang before finally connecting her to an automated system. She was transferred 3 times, each person telling her the wait would be another hour. By the time she hung up in frustration, the sun was starting to set. She sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it tightly, trying not to panic. Her perfect Tuesday was falling apart, and she was stranded in a neighborhood where she definitely didn't belong. Malik Johnson wiped his hands on his work shirt and checked his watch. 6:30. His shift at the apartment building was done, and Noah would be waiting upstairs with Mrs. Alvarez. The 7-year-old was probably helping with dinner again, asking a million questions about everything from why onions made people cry to whether fish got cold in winter. Malik smiled, thinking about it. His son had the biggest heart and the most curious mind of any kid he knew. Noah was the best thing that had ever happened to him, even if being a single dad some days felt like trying to juggle fire while walking on a tightrope. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, his toolbox in one hand, work boots quiet on the worn carpet. Mrs. Alvarez's door was already open, warm light and the smell of rice and beans spilling into the hallway. "Papa!" Noah bounded toward him, backpack bouncing on his shoulders. His dark eyes lit up the way they always did when Malik came to get him. "Mrs. Alvarez taught me how to fold the napkins fancy, and I helped with the beans, and I did my homework already. Slow down, little man." Malik knelt and pulled his son into a hug, breathing in the scent of his shampoo. "Did you say thank you?" "Thank you, Mrs. Alvarez," Noah called over his shoulder. The older woman appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. Elena Alvarez had lived in the building for 20 years and had appointed herself the unofficial grandmother to every child in the complex. She was small and round, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "He's an angel as always," she said in her soft accent. "You raising him right, Malik." "Trying my best." He stood and shouldered Noah's backpack. "Thanks for watching him. I owe you dinner soon." "You don't owe me nothing. That boy brings me joy." Noah slipped his hand into Malik's as they headed down the stairs. "Can we walk the long way home?" "Please?" The long way meant going around the block instead of cutting through the alley. It added 5 minutes to their trip, but Noah liked looking in the shop windows and waving at the neighbors sitting on their stoops. "Sure, buddy, but just this once." They stepped outside into the early evening air. The street was alive with the usual sounds. Kids playing, music drifting from open windows, the hum of traffic on the main road. Malik loved this neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. People looked out for each other here. They were walking past the corner when Noah stopped short. "Papa, look." Malik followed his son's gaze to a silver car parked crookedly near the curb. Through the windshield, he could see a woman in a business suit sitting behind the wheel, phone pressed to her ear. Even from a distance, her frustration was obvious. "She looks sad," Noah said quietly. Malik was about to keep walking when he heard her voice carry through the evening air. She had her window cracked, probably trying to get some air circulation, and her words floated out clearly. "I'm just tired of unsuccessful black guys thinking they have a shot." The words hit him like a slap, not because they were directed at him specifically, but because he'd heard that tone before, that casual dismissal, that assumption that someone like him wasn't worth considering. Noah tugged on his hand. "Papa, can we help her?" Malik looked down at his son's earnest face, then back at the woman in the car. Every instinct told him to keep walking. He didn't owe this stranger anything, especially not after what he'd just heard. But Noah's hand was warm in his, and the boy was looking up at him with those eyes that expected the best from everyone. Malik had promised himself that he would always be the kind of man Noah could be proud of. He sighed. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's see if she needs help." They approached the car slowly. The woman looked up as they got closer, and Malik could see the wariness in her eyes. She was pretty in that polished way that came from expensive salons and careful maintenance. Her makeup was perfect, despite whatever stress she was dealing with. She rolled down her window a few more inches. "Excuse me," Malik said, keeping his voice gentle. "You having car trouble?" She blinked at him, clearly flustered. "Oh, yes, It won't start. I've been trying to call for help, but... Mind if I take a look?" She hesitated, and he could practically see the calculations happening behind her eyes. Strange neighborhood, stranger man, expensive car. But whatever internal debate she was having, desperation won. Yes, thank you." Malik set his toolbox down and walked around to the front of the car. "Can you pop the hood for me?" The engine bay was clean, but clearly hadn't been serviced in a while. He checked the battery connections first. They were corroded, white and green buildup around the terminals, but that wasn't the main problem. "Ma'am, when's the last time you had your tires checked?" "My tires." She got out of the car, smoothing down her skirt. "I don't." "Why?" He knelt by the front wheel and pointed. "This one's nearly bald. You've been riding on borrowed time. The battery's dead too, but that tire's dangerous." She knelt beside him, her heels clicking against the asphalt. This close, he caught a hint of expensive perfume. "I had no idea. I don't really know much about cars." "That's okay. A lot of people don't." He stood and wiped his hands on his shirt. "The good news is we can get you to a safer spot. This street gets busy once people start heading home from work." "You'd do that? You don't even know me." Malik looked at her for a moment, remembering what she'd said on the phone. She didn't know he'd heard it. Maybe she didn't even remember saying it. But Noah was watching this whole interaction, learning what it meant to help someone, and that mattered more than his hurt feelings. "Everyone needs help sometimes," he said simply. With Noah watching from the sidewalk, Malik put the car in neutral and pushed it to a better parking spot while the woman steered. His back strained against the weight, but he got it moved to a place where tow trucks could reach it easily. When he finished, she was already reaching into her purse. She pulled out her wallet and extracted several $20 bills. "Please let me pay you for your time," she said, holding the money toward him. The bills fluttered in the evening breeze. Malik looked at them, then at her earnest face, then at Noah, who was listening to every word. "Keep it," he said quietly. "Call your mechanic tomorrow. Get that tire changed before you drive anywhere." Her mouth fell open slightly. "But you helped me. I should pay you." "No need." He picked up his toolbox and started walking back toward Noah. "Just drive safe." Noah had his little backpack open and was digging around inside. He pulled out a small water bottle and ran toward the woman. "Here," he said, offering it to her. "You look thirsty." She took the bottle with shaking hands, and for a moment, her composed mask slipped. Malik saw something vulnerable underneath, something lost. "Thank you," she whispered to Noah. "That's very kind." Noah beamed at her, then ran back to Malik's side. They walked away together, father and son, leaving the woman standing beside her broken car with a child's water bottle in her hands. "That was a good thing you did, Papa," Noah said as they turned the corner. "You too, buddy. Sharing your water was thoughtful." She seemed really worried. Malik nodded, not trusting himself to say more. His chest felt tight with emotions he didn't want to examine too closely. The woman's words echoed in his head, mixing with Noah's innocent kindness and his own complicated feelings about helping someone who saw him as fundamentally unsuccessful. But that was the thing about doing the right thing. It didn't depend on how other people saw you. It depended on how you saw yourself and what kind of man you wanted your son to become. They climbed the stairs to their apartment, Noah chattering about his day, and Malik tried to let the familiar routine wash away the sting of casual prejudice. Tomorrow was another day. There would be pipes to fix, problems to solve, and Noah's bright smile to come home to. That was enough. It had to be. Evie sat in her apartment that night, still replaying the interaction. She'd kicked off her heels the moment she walked through the door, leaving them beside the cream-colored couch that had cost more than most people's monthly rent. Everything in her apartment was carefully chosen. The abstract art on the walls, the marble coffee table, the fresh orchids that a service replaced every 2 weeks. It was beautiful and empty and perfectly controlled. She couldn't stop thinking about the man who'd helped her, his calm competence as he'd diagnosed her car problems, the way he'd refused her money without any anger or attitude, his son's sweet gesture with the water bottle. Most of all, she couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said on the phone. Sitting there in her pristine living room, the words sounded different in her memory. Harsher, uglier. She tried to remember if the man had been close enough to hear her, but the timeline was fuzzy. She'd been on the phone, then she'd hung up, then he'd appeared. Had he heard her? The thought made her stomach twist. She opened her laptop and typed "tire safety symptoms" into the search bar. The results confirmed everything he'd told her. Bald tires were dangerous, especially in wet weather. The fact that she'd been driving around on them for who knew how long made her feel sick. He'd been right about everything, and she'd tried to throw money at him like he was some kind of charity case. She drafted a text message to no one. She didn't have his number. She didn't even know his name. She deleted the draft and tried again. I wanted to thank you properly for helping me tonight. You saved me from a really bad situation, and I was too flustered to express my gratitude. If you'd left your number, I would have called to delete. What was she doing? Even if she had his number, what would she say? Sorry I called you unsuccessful while you were literally on your way to help me. She closed the laptop and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the patient way he'd knelt beside her tire, explaining what was wrong without making her feel stupid. She saw his son's bright smile and the careful way the man had spoken to the boy, like every word mattered. She saw the dignity in how he'd refused her money. Somewhere across town, Malik was going through his own evening routine. He helped Noah brush his teeth, read him a story about a dragon who learned to make friends instead of hoarding treasure, and tucked him into the narrow bed they'd found at a thrift store. Papa, Noah said as Malik was turning off the light. Why did that lady look so sad? Malik paused in the doorway. What do you mean? When we first saw her, before you helped, she looked. I don't know. Like when I'm really worried about a test. Kids saw everything, Malik thought. They caught the emotions adults tried to hide. Some people don't know what they don't know, he said finally. Sometimes that makes them scared. But you helped her anyway. Yeah, buddy, I did. Even though she was scared of us? The question hit Malik right in the chest. He came back and sat on the edge of Noah's bed. What makes you think she was scared of us? Noah shrugged, but his dark eyes were serious. She looked at us the way Mrs. Patterson looks at the teenagers who play music too loud, like we might be trouble. Malik smoothed down his son's hair, 7 years old, and already noticing the way some people looked at them. It broke his heart. Some people have been taught to be afraid of people who look different from them, he said carefully. That doesn't make it right, but it doesn't make them bad people either. Sometimes they just need to learn better. Did we help her learn better? I hope so. Noah yawned and snuggled deeper into his pillow. I liked helping her, even if she was scared. Me too, buddy. Me too. Malik kissed his son's forehead and finally turned off the light. In the kitchen, he made himself a cup of tea and sat at the small table they'd bought secondhand. The apartment was quiet, except for the usual building sounds: pipes settling, footsteps from upstairs, the hum of the refrigerator. He should be proud of how the evening had gone. He'd helped someone in need, shown Noah what it meant to be kind even when kindness wasn't expected or appreciated. That was the lesson that mattered. But her words kept circling back. Unsuccessful black guys. Like success was measured only by the size of your bank account or the neighborhood you lived in. Like the work he did every day to keep their building running, to keep Noah fed and happy and safe, didn't count for anything. He'd worked hard to build a life he was proud of. He had a steady job, kept his word, paid his bills on time. He loved his son fiercely and was raising him to be a good person. If that wasn't success, what was? But he knew what people like her saw when they looked at him. The uniform shirt with his name embroidered on the pocket, the apartment in a building that had seen better days, the fact that he fixed other people's problems instead of sitting in boardrooms making decisions. It stung. Even though he tried not to let it, even though he knew his worth wasn't determined by anyone else's opinion, it stung. He finished his tea and got ready for bed, setting his alarm for 6 a.m. Tomorrow was Thursday, which meant replacing the filters in the building's ventilation system and checking the fire extinguishers. Regular maintenance that kept everyone safe and comfortable. Important work, even if some people didn't see it that way. Before he fell asleep, Malik found himself thinking about the woman's face when Noah had offered her water. For just a moment, her polished mask had slipped, and he'd seen something real underneath, something uncertain and maybe a little lost. Everyone was fighting battles nobody else could see. He knew that. Maybe tomorrow would be a chance for all of them to do better. The next morning, Malik walked Noah to school and then headed to work, taking his usual route past the spot where the woman's car had been stranded. It was gone now, towed away during the night. But something made him pause. He pulled out his phone and took a picture of the tire marks on the asphalt, the way they showed the uneven wear pattern he'd noticed. Then he tore a page from the small notebook he kept for work orders and wrote a brief message. Your front right tire was showing uneven wear, which means alignment issues. The photo shows what I mean. Get them both checked when you replace the bald one. The vibration you probably feel at highway speeds comes from this. MM. He slipped the note and the photo under the windshield wiper of the car parked in the same spot. A different car, but the space where hers had been. She'd probably never see it, but if she did, maybe it would help. It was a small kindness, no strings attached. The kind of gesture Noah would approve of. Across town, Evie's car was being delivered by the towing company to her usual parking spot near her apartment. She'd taken an Uber to work, enduring the driver's attempt at small talk while she stared out the window and thought about the night before. The morning meeting dragged. Mr. Richardson introduced her to a new client file, something about property advisory services for a modest apartment building. Keep the recommendations clean and profitable, he said, the way he always did. These smaller properties can be tricky. Sometimes you have to be creative to maximize value. She nodded and took the file, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about the dignity in the way the man had refused her money, the patient way he'd explained about her tires without making her feel stupid, his son's generous heart. When she got back to her car after work, there was something under the windshield wiper. A piece of paper with a photo printed from someone's phone. She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat, measured. Your front right tire was showing uneven wear, which means alignment issues. The photo shows what I mean. Get them both checked when you replace the bald one. The vibration you probably feel at highway speeds comes from this. M. She stared at the note for a long moment. There was no phone number, no request for thanks or payment. Just helpful information, freely given. The photo clearly showed what he was talking about. The uneven treadwear she'd never noticed, but which probably explained why her car had felt a little shaky on the highway lately. He'd taken time out of his morning to do this. For her, a stranger who'd tried to tip him like he was a service employee. Sitting there in her car with the note in her hands, Evie felt something crack open in her chest. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No soaring music or sudden revelation, just a quiet recognition that she'd been wrong about something important. The property file sat on her passenger seat. She picked it up and looked at the address for the first time. Her heart stopped. It was the same neighborhood where her car had broken down, the same area where the man, M, had helped her. She checked the time. 4:30. The site visit was scheduled for 5 p.m. There was no way it was a coincidence. Was there? She drove to the address with shaking hands, the note still folded carefully in her purse. The building was exactly what she'd expected from the file. Older but well-maintained, with a small front garden and residents sitting on the front steps enjoying the afternoon sun. She parked and checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Professional, composed, ready to do her job, whatever that turned out to be. But as she walked toward the building entrance, her heart was pounding. What were the chances that she'd run into him again? What would she say if she did? The property manager met her in the lobby, a thin man with nervous energy who immediately began pointing out problem areas and improvement opportunities. Evie nodded and made notes, but part of her attention was tuned to the sounds of the building. Footsteps on stairs, the distant sound of children playing, normal life happening all around her. Then she heard it. The sound of tools, someone working. The steady rhythm of repair. She followed the property manager toward the back of the building, her professional composure held in place by sheer willpower. Whatever happened next, she was going to handle it with dignity. She owed him that much. And maybe, she thought as they turned the corner, she owed herself the chance to do better. The sound of metal on metal echoed through the hallway as Evie followed the property manager deeper into the building. Her heels clicked against the worn but clean tile floor, and she caught the faint smell of cleaning supplies mixed with something else, maybe fresh bread from one of the apartments. As you can see, the infrastructure needs updating, the property manager was saying. He was a thin man named Dennis, who spoke too fast and kept checking his phone. The residents are... well, they're fine, but the profit margins could be much better with some strategic changes. Evie nodded absently, still listening to the rhythmic sound of repair work. It was getting closer. They rounded a corner, and there he was. Malik knelt beside the stair railing, a small toolbox open beside him. He was tightening bolts with careful precision, his work shirt stretched across his broad shoulders. The late afternoon light from a nearby window caught the concentration on his face as he checked each connection. He looked up at the sound of their footsteps, and their eyes met. The moment stretched between them like a held breath. Evie felt heat rise in her cheeks. Malik's expression went carefully neutral, but she caught the flash of recognition in his dark eyes. "Oh, good," Dennis said, oblivious to the tension. "Malik, this is Ms. Hart from the advisory firm. She's here to assess the property." Malik stood slowly, wiping his hands on a work rag. "Ms. Hart." His voice was perfectly polite, professionally distant. "Mr." Evie's voice came out shakier than she'd intended. "Johnson. Malik Johnson. I handle maintenance and HVAC for the building." The formal introduction felt strange after their encounter the night before, like they were pretending to be strangers when they both knew better. "Malik's been here about 2 years," Dennis continued. "Keeps things running smoothly. Very reliable." Evie forced herself to focus on the conversation. That's good to hear." She looked at the railing Malik had been working on. "Safety issues?" "Just preventive maintenance," Malik said. "The bolts work loose over time with normal use. Better to catch them before they become a problem." His competence was obvious in the way he spoke about the work, the organized tools, the careful attention to detail. This wasn't someone just going through the motions. This was someone who took pride in keeping people safe. "I'd like to continue the tour," Dennis said, checking his phone again. "We should look at the units that will be coming available." "Coming available?" Evie asked. "The renewal situation. I thought that was part of your brief." A cold weight settled in Evie's stomach. She looked at Malik, but his expression gave nothing away. "Of course," she said. "Lead the way." As they walked past Malik, she wanted to stop, to say something, anything that might bridge the awkward space between them. But Dennis was already moving, and Malik had turned back to his work. The tour continued for another hour. Dennis showed her units that would need updating, talked about market rate adjustments, and demographic optimization. The language was familiar from dozens of similar projects, but today it felt different. Today she could put faces to the abstract concepts. When Dennis mentioned that several families would likely need to relocate, all Evie could think about was the little boy who'd offered her water. "I'll need some time to review everything," she said finally. "Can I get copies of the current lease agreements?" "Already in the file I sent over. Anything specific you're looking for?" "Just due diligence. I like to be thorough." Dennis nodded approvingly. "That's what we like to hear. Attention to detail." They were heading back toward the lobby when chaos erupted from somewhere above them. The sound of rushing water, shouting voices, and heavy footsteps on the stairs. "What the hell?" Dennis muttered. Malik appeared at the top of the stairwell, moving fast, but controlled. "Mrs. Chen's sink line burst," he called down. "I need to shut off the water main. Keep people out of the hallway on 3. He disappeared again before Dennis could respond. "This is exactly the kind of thing I mean," Dennis said to Evie. "Old building, old problems, the insurance costs alone." But Evie wasn't listening. She was climbing the stairs. The third-floor hallway was organized chaos. Water spread across the worn carpet from under one apartment door. Malik had the main valve shut off and was kneeling beside an elderly Chinese woman, speaking to her in calm, reassuring tones. "It's going to be okay, Mrs. Chen. The water's stopped. We'll get this cleaned up." 2 small children peeked out from another apartment, eyes wide with excitement. Their mother tried to pull them back inside, but they were fascinated by the drama. "Stay back from the water," Malik told them gently. "It's slippery, and I don't want anyone to get hurt." He moved between problems effortlessly, directing tenants away from the spreading water, checking that Mrs. Chen wasn't injured, reassuring the children. His work shirt was soaked, but he didn't seem to notice. Evie found herself holding towels that someone had thrust into her hands. She knelt beside Malik, helping to contain the worst of the flooding. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Could be worse. The valve shut off clean, so it's just what was already in the line. Mrs. Chen, do you have somewhere to stay tonight while we dry things out?" The elderly woman nodded, rapid Chinese mixed with English. "My daughter. She come get me." "Good. I'll make sure your apartment is secure before you go." Evie watched him work, saw the way the residents trusted him completely. No one questioned his authority or his competence. When he said things would be okay, they believed him. It took nearly an hour to get the water contained and the hallway safe. Dennis had disappeared somewhere during the crisis, leaving Evie to help where she could. By the time things calmed down, her business clothes were damp, and her carefully styled hair was coming loose from its bun. "Thank you," Malik said, as they stood in the lobby afterward. "You didn't have to help." "I wanted to." She looked down at her wet skirt, though I'm not sure how much help I actually was. "More than you know." Mrs. Chen was pretty shaken up. Having another woman there to talk to made a difference. They stood there for a moment, the formal distance from earlier replaced by something more complicated. Evie wanted to bring up the note he'd left on her car, to thank him properly for helping her. But the weight of the property file in her briefcase made everything feel tangled. "I should go," she said finally. "Let you get back to this." "Yeah, It's going to be a long night getting everything dried out. She turned to leave, then stopped. Malik, the note you left, about my tires. Thank you. You were right about everything. He nodded, but didn't smile. Drive safe. Walking back to her car, Evie felt like she was caught between two different worlds. The professional distance of the property assessment and the personal connection of helping during a crisis. The formal politeness of Mr. Johnson and the warmth of working side by side with towels and reassuring words. By the time she got home, her apartment felt even more sterile than usual. She ordered takeout and spread the property files across her dining room table, trying to focus on the numbers and projections Dennis had provided. But every time she looked at a lease renewal date or a market rate analysis, she thought about Mrs. Chen's worried face, about the children peeking out of their apartment with curiosity instead of fear, about the way Malik had handled the crisis with steady competence while she'd fumbled with towels in her business suit. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Dinner tomorrow? Graham called asking about you. Evie stared at the message for a long moment, then set her phone aside without responding. The next day was Friday, which meant Malik's schedule was packed with preventive maintenance rounds. He started early, checking the building's heating system before most residents were awake. The work was familiar and comforting. Routine tasks that let his hands stay busy while his mind processed yesterday's complications. Seeing Evie in a professional context had been jarring, not just because of their previous encounter, but because of what it implied. If she was part of the team assessing the building, that meant changes were coming. In his experience, advisory assessments rarely led to good news for tenants. But she'd stayed to help during the flooding. That wasn't something he'd expected from someone in her position. Most people in expensive suits would have found an excuse to leave. He was replacing air filters in the basement when his phone rang. Noah's school. Mr. Johnson, this is the school nurse. Noah's fine, but he has a bit of a fever. Nothing serious, but we'd like him picked up. Malik checked his watch. 11 a.m. He had 3 more maintenance orders to complete, but Noah came first. Always. I'll be right there. He gathered his tools and headed upstairs to let Dennis know he'd be out for the rest of the day. But Dennis wasn't in his office. Instead, he found a note saying he'd be showing prospective buyers around the building and would be back Monday. Prospective buyers. Malik's stomach tightened. He picked up Noah from school and brought him home, settling his son on the couch with juice and cartoons. The fever was low grade, probably just a 24-hour thing, but Noah was clingy in the way kids got when they didn't feel well. Papa, my head hurts, he said, snuggling against Malik's side. I know, buddy. Rest will help. They spent the afternoon quietly. Malik caught up on paperwork while Noah dozed, both of them enjoying the rare luxury of an unexpected day together. But Malik couldn't shake the feeling that changes were coming, whether they wanted them or not. Around 4 p.m., there was a soft knock at the door. Malik looked through the peephole and felt his pulse quicken. Evie stood in the hallway, holding a small paper bag. He opened the door, but didn't invite her in. Ms. Hart, I'm sorry to bother you. I heard Noah wasn't feeling well and She held up the bag. It's just soup, from the place down the street. I know it's probably presumptuous, but... She was nervous, he realized. The polished composure from yesterday was replaced by uncertainty. That's thoughtful, he said. But you didn't need to... Papa? Noah's voice came from the couch. Who's at the door? Malik hesitated, then stepped aside. Come in. Evie followed him into the small living room. If she was surprised by the modest furnishings, she didn't show it. Her attention went immediately to Noah, who was curled up under a blanket with flushed cheeks. Hey there, she said softly. I heard you weren't feeling great. Noah sat up a little, studying her. You're the lady from the other night, with the broken car. That's right. I brought some soup if you're hungry. What kind? Chicken noodle, the classic. Noah looked to Malik, who nodded. That sounds good, buddy. Let me heat it up for you. In the small kitchen, Malik opened the container while Evie sat carefully on the edge of the couch. He could hear her talking quietly with Noah, asking about school and his favorite subjects. Her voice was gentle, patient in the way of someone who actually liked children. When he brought the soup back, Noah was telling her about the book they'd been reading together. It's about a dragon who makes friends, Noah was saying. Papa does different voices for all the characters. I bet he's good at that, Evie said. Your papa seems good at lots of things. Their eyes met over Noah's head, and Malik felt something shift between them. Not the professional distance or the awkward politeness, but something more honest. I should let you rest, Evie said, standing. I hope you feel better soon, Noah. Thank you for the soup, Noah said. And for helping us move your car the other night. Evie's cheeks flushed pink. You helped me much more than I helped you. Malik walked her to the door. In the hallway, she turned back to him. I wanted to say something yesterday, but there wasn't a good moment. I'm sorry about trying to pay you the other night. It was wrong of me. You were grateful. Nothing wrong with that. There was something wrong with how I did it, like you were. She struggled for words. Like your help was a service instead of a kindness. He studied her face, looking for the politeness that usually came with apologies from people in her position. Instead, he found what looked like genuine regret. Apology accepted, he said quietly. She nodded, then surprised him by asking, Can I ask you something? The building assessment yesterday. Are they going to be okay here? The question hung between them. Malik knew what she was really asking, and he appreciated that she'd asked directly instead of dancing around it. I don't know, he said honestly. Depends on what your report says. It's not my report. I'm just part of the team. But you have influence. She was quiet for a moment. Some. Then I guess we'll see what happens. After she left, Malik sat with Noah while his son finished the soup. It was good soup, he had to admit. The kind of quality you paid extra for, brought from a restaurant instead of opened from a can. I like her, Noah said sleepily. She has a nice voice. Yeah, she does. Is she going to help us with the building? Malik looked down at his son's trusting face. I hope so, buddy. But hope was a dangerous thing when you didn't have control over the outcome. All he could do was keep being the best father he could be, keep doing his job with integrity, and trust that good people would make good choices when the time came. Over the weekend, Evie found herself thinking about Friday afternoon more than she wanted to admit. The way Malik's small apartment had felt warmer and more like home than her expensive high-rise. Noah's sweet gratitude for something as simple as soup. The easy intimacy of a father taking care of his sick child. She'd grown up in houses with staff, where childhood illnesses meant being left with nannies while her parents continued their social obligations. The idea of a parent dropping everything to come home and provide comfort was foreign to her experience, but watching Malik with Noah had made something in her chest ache. On Sunday, her mother called to confirm dinner. Graham will be there, Marianne Hart said without preamble. He's very interested in reconciling. Mother, I told you we're done. Don't be dramatic, Evelyn. Graham comes from good people. He has prospects. What more do you want? Evie stared out her apartment window at the city skyline. What did she want? A week ago, she would have said success, stability, someone who fit into her world without complications. Now she wasn't sure. I'll come to dinner, she said, but don't ambush me with Graham. It's not an ambush, it's an opportunity. Monday morning came with a stack of new files on Evie's desk and a request to expedite the building assessment. She spent the morning reviewing lease agreements and rent rolls, trying to approach the project with professional objectivity. but every tenant name had become real to her. Mrs. Chen, whose apartment had flooded. The family with the curious children. The building felt less like a collection of units, and more like a community. Around lunchtime, she made a decision that surprised her. Instead of eating at her usual spot near the office, she drove back to Malik's neighborhood and found a small diner she'd noticed during her building tour. The lunch crowd was a mix of construction workers, office employees, and neighborhood regulars. She felt overdressed in her business suit, but the waitress was friendly, and the menu was simple and honest. She was halfway through a surprisingly good sandwich when someone slid into the booth across from her. "Fancy seeing you here." Evie looked up to find Malik, work shirt clean but showing the wear of morning labor. He had a brown bag that probably contained his own lunch. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, which was technically true. "For work?" "Sort of." She gestured to the empty seat. "Join me?" He hesitated, then sat down. The waitress appeared immediately with coffee, and a smile that suggested Malik was a regular. "The usual, honey?" "Thanks, Rosa." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Around them, the diner hummed with conversation and the sounds of a working lunch rush. "How's Noah feeling?" Evie asked. "Better. Back to school today with about 1,000 questions about why soup makes you feel better when you're sick." "And what did you tell him?" "That sometimes taking care of people is like magic. You don't have to understand it for it to work." Evie smiled. "That's a good answer. He's 7. Simple answers work better than complicated ones." Rosa brought Malik's order, a sandwich and soup that looked homemade. He unwrapped it carefully, and Evie noticed the practiced efficiency of someone who usually ate lunch standing up or while working. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He looked up, chewing thoughtfully. "Shoot." "The other night, when you helped me. Did you hear what I said on the phone?" The question had been eating at her for days. She needed to know. Malik set down his sandwich and looked at her directly. "Yeah, I heard." The simple honesty hit her like a physical blow. "And you helped me anyway." "My son was watching. I wasn't going to teach him that someone's bad opinions meant they didn't deserve help when they needed it." Evie felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm sorry. What I said was ugly and wrong." It was. No polite deflection, no attempt to make her feel better about it, just acknowledgement that her words had been hurtful. "I don't know why I said it," she continued. "Actually, that's not true. I do know why. I was frustrated and taking it out on people who didn't deserve it. People like me." "Yes." She met his eyes. "People like you, who work hard and take care of their families and help strangers with broken cars. People who are more successful at being human than I am." Malik studied her face for a long moment. "That's quite an admission." "It's overdue." They finished lunch with easier conversation. About the neighborhood, about Noah's school, about small things that didn't carry the weight of property assessments or past mistakes. When Malik excused himself to get back to work, Evie felt something had shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding. That evening, Evie sat in her apartment with the building files spread across her coffee table. She'd been staring at the same page for 20 minutes, trying to find a way to make the numbers work that wouldn't displace half the tenants. The problem was simple. The building was profitable as it was, but it could be much more profitable with improvements that would price out the current residents. Her job was to maximize returns for the investors, not to protect tenants who paid below market rate. But every time she looked at the spreadsheet, she saw Noah's bright smile and Mrs. Chen's worried face during the flood. Her phone rang. Sarah's name on the screen. "Hey," Evie said, grateful for the distraction. "You sound tired. Long day." "You could say that." Evie rubbed her temples. "I'm working on a project that's more complicated than I expected." "Want to talk about it?" Evie looked at the files scattered around her living room. "Remember the guy who helped me with my car?" The one you called unsuccessful? That was a horrible thing to say. I'm not judging. What about him? I ran into him again. Turns out he works at a building I'm supposed to assess for potential changes. And Sarah, he's not unsuccessful at all. He's actually amazing at what he does. And he's a single dad who's raising the sweetest kid I've ever met. There was silence on the other end of the line. Evie, Sarah said carefully, are you developing feelings for this guy? I don't know. Maybe. Is that crazy? It's not crazy. But it's complicated, right? Given the work situation? Very complicated. What are you going to do? Evie looked at the spreadsheet on her laptop screen. Numbers that could change people's lives, reduce them to profit margins and market rates. I'm going to figure out how to do the right thing, she said. I just hope I'm smart enough to know what that is. After they hung up, Evie made herself a cup of tea and returned to the files. But instead of looking for ways to maximize profits, she started looking for ways to preserve what was already working. It was going to be a long night, but for the first time in days, she felt like she was working towards something worthwhile. Outside her window, the city hummed with its usual energy. Somewhere across town, Malik was probably helping Noah with homework or reading bedtime stories about dragons who learned to make friends. Simple moments that mattered more than all the spreadsheets in the world. Tomorrow, she would have to find a way to bridge the gap between her professional obligations and her growing understanding of what really counted as success. She had a feeling it was going to be the most important work she'd ever done. Tuesday morning brought gray clouds and the kind of humidity that made Evie's hair curl at the edges no matter how much product she used. She sat in her office, staring at the building assessment draft on her computer screen, when her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Don't be late. Evie had been dreading this dinner all week. Her mother's opportunities usually felt more like ambushes, and the thought of spending an evening deflecting Graham's renewed interest made her stomach clench. She was still staring at the message when Mr. Richardson appeared in her doorway. Evie, how's the Maxwell Street property coming along? Still reviewing the numbers, she said, minimizing the document. There are some considerations that need careful analysis. Such as? She chose her words carefully. The current tenant base is very stable. Low turnover, consistent payment history. There might be value in a phased approach rather than immediate wholesale changes. Richardson frowned. The investors want maximum returns, not social work. Keep that in mind. After he left, Evie pulled up the spreadsheet again. She'd spent hours trying to find a middle path, but the math was stubborn. The building could house the current families at current rents, or it could be renovated and rented at market rates to new tenants. It couldn't do both. Around lunchtime, she found herself driving toward the building again. She told herself she needed to take another look at the property, maybe talk to a few more tenants to get a complete picture. The truth was, she wanted to see Malik. She found him on the building's back steps, fixing a loose railing. His movements were precise and economical, each adjustment tested before he moved to the next. He looked up as she approached, squinting against the cloudy light. Ms. Hart, back for another assessment? Something like that. She gestured to the railing. Safety issue? Preventive maintenance. Better to fix small problems before they become big ones. She watched him work for a moment, noting the care he took with each bolt. Can I ask you something personal? He looked up, eyebrows raised. Why maintenance work? I mean, what drew you to it? Malik set down his wrench and sat back on his heels. You really want to know? I do. He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. When I was a kid, our apartment had a broken radiator, middle of winter, and the landlord kept saying he'd fix it next week. My mom was working 2 jobs, couldn't afford to move, so we lived in our coats for 3 months. Evie felt something twist in her chest. I decided then that I never wanted anyone to be cold, because someone else couldn't be bothered to do their job right. He picked up his wrench again. Maybe that sounds simple to you. It sounds important. Their eyes met, and she felt that shift again, the space between them becoming something charged and complicated. Papa. They turned to see Noah running across the small courtyard, backpack bouncing. He threw himself into Malik's arms with the kind of unguarded affection that made Evie's chest ache. Hey, buddy. How was school? Good. We learned about fractions today. Mrs. Patterson said I'm really good at math. Noah noticed Evie and smiled shyly. Hi, Ms. Evie. Hi, Noah. Fractions, huh? Those can be tricky. Not really. It's just parts of a whole. Like if you have a pizza and you eat 2 pieces out of 8, you ate 2/8. That's exactly right. Malik stood, gathering his tools. I need to get this guy a snack and help with homework. But... He hesitated, then looked directly at her. There's something you should know. There are rumors going around the building about changes coming. Evie's stomach dropped. What kind of rumors? The kind that make people worry about where they're going to live next month. Before she could respond, a voice called from across the courtyard. Well, well, look what we have here. A woman approached them, tall and striking with an attitude that preceded her like weather. She wore scrubs and moved with the confident stride of someone used to handling emergencies. Tasha, Malik said quietly. Noah's posture changed, becoming more careful. Hi, Mom. Evie realized this was Noah's mother, Malik's ex. She felt suddenly exposed, like she'd been caught somewhere she didn't belong. And who's this? Tasha asked, looking Evie up and down with undisguised assessment. A friend, Malik said before Evie could answer. A friend. Tasha's tone made it clear what she thought of that description. In a business suit, at our son's home. The possessiveness in those words, our son's home, wasn't lost on anyone. Tasha, what do you need? Malik's voice stayed calm, but Evie could see the tension in his shoulders. I came to see Noah. Is that a problem? Of course not. Noah, go put your backpack inside. Your mom wants to talk to you. Noah looked between the adults, clearly sensing the undercurrents. Are you coming up too, Papa? In a few minutes. After Noah disappeared into the building, Tasha turned her attention fully to Evie. So, friend. What kind of friend are you exactly? Tasha, Malik warned. It's okay, Evie said, though her pulse was racing. I work for a consulting firm. I've been assessing the property. Assessing. Tasha's smile was sharp. That's a nice way of saying you're here to kick people out. It's more complicated than that. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're cozying up to my ex while figuring out how to destroy his life. The accusation hit like a slap. Evie felt heat rise in her cheeks, partly from embarrassment and partly from anger. That's not what's happening here, she said. No? Then what is happening? Because Malik's got a good thing going with this building, and Noah's settled here. If some rich white woman thinks she can waltz in and... That's enough, Malik said quietly, but with enough steel in his voice to cut through Tasha's momentum. Is it? Because I'm looking at a pattern here, Malik. You and your taste for complicated women. Evie felt like she was watching a private argument play out, one with history she couldn't understand. But the implication was clear. Malik had a history of relationships that ended badly, and Tasha thought she was the next complication waiting to happen. I should go, Evie said. Probably best, Tasha agreed. But Malik stepped closer to Evie. You don't have to leave because of this. Actually, I do. Evie looked between them, seeing the complicated dynamics of co-parenting and past hurt. Noah needs time with his mom, and you two need to figure this out. She walked away before anyone could argue, her heels echoing against the concrete. Behind her, she could hear the low murmur of Malik and Tasha's voices, but she couldn't make out words. In her car, she sat for a moment with her hands shaking on the steering wheel. The encounter had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. not just because of Tasha's hostility, but because of the grain of truth in her accusations. Was she cozying up to Malik while preparing to recommend changes that could force him to move? Was she kidding herself about being able to separate her personal feelings from her professional obligations? Her phone rang. Her mother. "I hope you're not planning to be late tonight." "I'll be there," Evie said. "Good. And Evelyn, wear the blue dress, the one Graham likes." The Hart family dinner table could have been featured in a magazine. Crystal glasses, fresh flowers, multiple courses served on china that had been in the family for generations. Everything was perfect, controlled, and completely lacking in warmth. Evie sat across from Graham Pike, who looked exactly like what he was, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, with perfect teeth and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd been talking for 20 minutes about his latest promotion and the new country club he'd joined. "And the golf course is championship level," he was saying. "I thought maybe this weekend we could play 18 holes, like old times." "Graham," Evie said carefully, "I thought I made it clear that we're not getting back together. You were upset about that misunderstanding with my assistant. I told you, it was completely innocent." Evie looked at her mother, who was studying her wineglass with sudden fascination. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Graham. You were texting her at midnight asking if she wanted to come up to your apartment. You're being dramatic. Besides, that's ancient history now." Her mother finally spoke up. "Evelyn, perhaps you're being a bit harsh. Graham made a mistake. Good men learn from their mistakes." "Do they?" Evie set down her fork. "Because it seems to me that good men don't make those particular mistakes in the first place." Graham leaned forward, turning on the charm that had once impressed her. "Evie, sweetheart, I know I wasn't always the most attentive boyfriend. But I've changed. I'm ready to settle down now, really focus on building something meaningful. With me, or with someone like me? What's the difference?" The question hung in the air, and Evie realized that for Graham, there really wasn't a difference. She wasn't a person to him. She was a position to be filled. Someone with the right background, the right connections, the right look for the life he wanted to project. "The difference," she said quietly, "is that one involves actually caring about who I am." Her mother cleared her throat. "Evelyn, dear, love isn't just about feelings. It's about building a stable life with someone who shares your values and social position." "What if my values are changing?" "Then you need to be very careful about what's influencing that change," her mother said with pointed meaning. Evie felt a flash of understanding. Her mother knew something was going on. Maybe not the details, but enough to be concerned about her daughter's recent behavior. "Graham," Marianne continued, "why don't you tell Evelyn about the foundation gala next month? I think she'd enjoy being involved in the planning." For the next hour, they talked around her as if she wasn't there, planning her social calendar, discussing mutual friends, mapping out a future that felt like a perfectly appointed prison. When dinner finally ended, Graham walked her to the valet stand. "I don't know what's gotten into you lately," he said, "but I'm willing to overlook it. You're obviously going through something, and I want to be supportive." "Supportive," she repeated. "Of course. That's what partners do." He leaned closer, his cologne expensive and overwhelming. "I know you think I don't understand you, but I do. You're ambitious, you're smart, and you're beautiful. We make sense together, Evie. Our families, our careers, our goals, everything aligns. And what if everything didn't align? What if I wanted something different?" Graham laughed, the sound condescending. "Like what? You're not going to throw away everything you've worked for to become a social worker or something." The dismissive tone in his voice reminded her uncomfortably of her own words from a week ago. Unsuccessful black guys. The memory made her cringe. "What if I did?" "Then you'd regret it." His smile faded, Look, I don't know what's brought this on, but you're talking nonsense. You're Evelyn Hart. You belong in our world, with our kind of people. Don't let whatever midlife crisis this is make you forget that. He kissed her cheek and walked away, confident that he'd made his point. Driving home, Evie felt like she was suffocating. The dinner, Graham's assumptions, her mother's manipulations, all of it pressed down on her like weight on her chest. Without really planning to, she found herself driving toward Malik's neighborhood. She parked across the street from his building and sat in her car, watching the warm light spill from windows where people were living their real lives. She saw Malik pass by one of the windows, Noah beside him. They seemed to be cleaning up after dinner, moving around each other with the easy coordination of a team. It looked peaceful. It looked like home. Her phone buzzed with a text from Graham. Had a great time tonight. Looking forward to the weekend. I'll pick you up at noon for golf. She stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. Wednesday brought rain and a message from Dennis that made Evie's stomach clench. Investors want preliminary recommendations by Friday. Keep it simple. Maximum ROI scenarios only. She stared at the email, then at the building files spread across her desk. There was no middle ground that would satisfy the investors. They wanted her to recommend gutting the building's character and pricing out families like Noah and Mrs. Chen. Around lunchtime, she made a decision that surprised her. Instead of eating at her desk, she drove to the building and knocked on Malik's apartment door. He answered wearing jeans and a t-shirt, work clothes swapped for something more comfortable. The domesticity of it, seeing him relaxed in his own space, made something flutter in her chest. Evie, everything okay? I brought lunch, she said, holding up a bag from the diner where they'd eaten together. If you're free. He stepped aside to let her in. The apartment felt different in daylight, smaller but warmer, with Noah's drawings on the refrigerator and books stacked on every available surface. Noah's at school, Malik said, taking the bag from her. But he'll be sorry he missed you. He's been asking when you're coming back. He has? Kids got good instincts about people. They ate lunch sitting across from each other at his small kitchen table. The conversation was easier now, without the weight of professional obligation or Tasha's hostility. He told her about Noah's latest obsession with space travel, and she found herself laughing at stories of 7-year-old logic applied to rocket science. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they finished eating. "Seems to be your favorite question." "Fair point." She took a breath. "Tasha yesterday. She seemed to think you have a pattern of complicated relationships." Malik's expression grew more guarded. "Tasha and I have a lot of history. Not all of it good. I don't need details. I want to understand what I'm walking into here. Are you walking into something?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and risk. Evie realized that somewhere in the past week, her feelings had shifted from professional interest to something much more personal. "I think so," she said quietly. "Are you?" Instead of answering immediately, Malik stood and moved to the window. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the street into a river of gray water. "Evie, you seem like a good person. But you live in a different world than I do. Your car costs more than I make in 6 months. Your apartment probably costs more in rent than this whole building. So when this gets complicated, and it will get complicated, you have options I don't have. You can walk away, start over somewhere else. I can't. This is my life. This building, this neighborhood, this community. It's all I've got." She joined him at the window, standing close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "What if I don't want to walk away?" He looked down at her, his dark eyes serious. "Then you need to be sure, because Noah's already getting attached to you. And if you decide this was just some kind of, experiment or rebellion against your usual type, It won't just be me who gets hurt. The weight of responsibility in his words hit her hard. This wasn't just about her and her feelings. There was a child involved. A child who'd already been through the upheaval of his parents' relationship ending. "I understand," she said. "Do you?" Before she could answer, her phone rang. She looked at the caller ID and felt her stomach drop. "I have to take this." "Evie? Where are you?" Dennis's voice was sharp with irritation. "The investors moved up the timeline. They want the preliminary report tomorrow, not Friday." "Tomorrow?" She turned away from Malik, lowering her voice. "That doesn't give me enough time to what? The numbers are straightforward. Renovate, raise rents, maximize returns. What's complicated about that?" She looked over her shoulder at Malik, who was clearly listening to her side of the conversation. "There are considerations beyond just the financial projections, such as the current tenant base is stable and Evie." Dennis's tone was warning. "Are you getting too close to this project? Because if you can't maintain professional objectivity, I need to know now." The question felt like an accusation, but also like an opportunity. She could tell Dennis yes, she was too close, and ask to be removed from the project. But that would mean abandoning any chance to influence the outcome. "I'm fine," she said. "I'll have the report to you by tomorrow afternoon." After she hung up, Malik was still standing by the window. "That was about the building," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. And they want you to recommend changes that will force people to move." She couldn't lie to him. "That's one option they're considering. The option they prefer." "Yes." Malik nodded slowly, like he'd expected this but hoped he was wrong. "So when you ask if I'm walking into something with you, the answer is complicated. Because while I'm trying to figure out my feelings, you're also trying to figure out how to destroy my life." The words were said without anger, but they hit like physical blows. "That's not... I'm trying to find another way." "Are you? Or are you trying to make yourself feel better about doing what you were always going to do?" She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the truth was she didn't know. Her professional training told her to maximize returns for the client. Her growing feelings for Malik made her want to protect him and Noah. And somewhere in between, she was trying to figure out what the right thing actually was. "I don't know," she admitted. "I really don't know." For the first time since she'd met him, Malik looked tired. Not physically tired, but emotionally worn down. "Then maybe you should figure that out before this goes any further." The dismissal was gentle but clear. Evie gathered her things and headed for the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "For what it's worth," she said, "I don't want to hurt you, or Noah." "I believe you," he said. "But sometimes people get hurt even when nobody wants it to happen." Outside, the rain soaked through her business suit before she reached her car. She sat behind the wheel, water dripping from her hair, and tried to figure out how she'd gotten so lost. Tomorrow she would have to choose between her career and her conscience, between professional success and personal integrity. Tonight, she was going to go home and figure out what kind of person she really wanted to be. Because Malik was right about one thing. Noah was watching all of this, learning about trust and disappointment, and what it meant when adults made promises they couldn't keep. She couldn't bear the thought of being the person who taught him that love was conditional and loyalty was for sale. Thursday morning came too soon and brought with it the weight of impossible choices. Evie sat at her kitchen table at 5 a.m., laptop open, staring at 2 different reports. The first was what Dennis and the investors wanted, a clear recommendation to renovate the building, raise rents to market rates, and maximize returns. It was professionally sound, financially responsible, and would probably earn her a promotion. The second was what her conscience demanded, a phased approach that would preserve affordable housing while making modest improvements. It protected the current tenants, but offered lower returns to investors. She knew which one she was supposed to submit. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Coffee before work? You sounded stressed yesterday." Evie typed back quickly. "Can't. Big deadline today. Call you later." But she couldn't focus on either report. Every time she tried to write the recommendation Dennis expected, she thought about Noah's bright smile and Mrs. Chen's worried face during the flood. Every time she considered submitting the tenant-friendly version, she heard Mr. Richardson's voice reminding her about professional obligations and career advancement. By 7 a.m., she'd made a decision that surprised her. She was going to tell the truth, all of it. Her report would acknowledge that maximum financial returns were possible through renovation and rent increases, but it would also document the current building's strengths: stable tenancy, low maintenance costs due to excellent building management, and strong community ties that reduce turnover. Most importantly, it would recommend a middle path that honored both financial responsibility and social impact. It wasn't what Dennis wanted, but it was honest. And honesty felt like the only thing she had left to stand on. She spent the morning crafting the language carefully, building a case for sustainable long-term returns rather than quick profit maximization. When she finally hit send at 11:30, her hands were shaking. Her phone rang immediately. "What the hell is this?" Dennis's voice was furious. "This isn't what we discussed. The investors want clear recommendations, not some social work manifesto. It's a comprehensive analysis that considers all relevant factors." "All relevant factors? Evie, our job is to maximize returns, not to worry about where tenants move when rents go up." The callousness in his voice made her stomach turn. "These are people's homes, Dennis. Families with children who are settled in their schools, elderly people who've lived here for decades. And that's their problem, not ours. I'm pulling you from this project. I'll handle the final recommendation myself." "You can't do that. I've been working on this for 2 weeks." "I can and I am. And Evie, Mr. Richardson is going to want to have a conversation with you about professional boundaries and career priorities." The line went dead. Evie sat in her office staring at the phone. In the space of one morning, she'd probably destroyed her career trajectory. But instead of panic, she felt something like relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, she'd done something because it was right, not because it was expected. Now she had to face the consequences. Across town, Malik was having his own difficult morning. A pipe had burst in the basement during the night, flooding the storage area where several tenants kept belongings. He'd spent 3 hours with a pump and industrial fans, trying to save what he could. Mrs. Chen's photograph albums were soaked. A young mother's baby clothes stored for her next child were ruined. Small losses that felt enormous to the people who'd trusted him to keep their building safe. "It's not your fault," Mrs. Alvarez said, finding him sitting on the basement steps with his head in his hands. "Old pipes break. That's just life in an old building. I should have seen it coming. There were signs, water pressure changes, rust in the utility sink. I should have been more careful." "Malik, honey, you can't predict everything. You do your best, but sometimes things just happen." He knew she was right, but it didn't make him feel better. The people in this building trusted him to keep them safe and comfortable. When he failed, even through no fault of his own, it felt personal. His phone rang. Dennis from the property management company. "Malik, we need to talk. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" "Is this about the basement flooding? Because I'm already getting quotes for pipe replacement and—" "It's not about the pipes. Just be here at 2 p.m. The tone was ominous. Malik had heard that voice before, usually right before someone got bad news. He spent the rest of the morning cleaning up water damage and trying not to think about what Dennis might want to discuss. But when Noah came home from school, chattering excitedly about a field trip to the Science Museum, Malik forced himself to focus on what mattered most. "Papa, can we go see the planetarium show this weekend? Mrs. Patterson said they have one about black holes, and I really want to learn about space." "Sure, buddy. That sounds great." "And can we invite Ms. Evie? She seems really smart about science stuff. Malik's chest tightened. He hadn't told Noah about the complications with the building assessment, hadn't wanted to worry him, but the innocent question felt like a knife twist. We'll see, Noah. She's probably busy with work stuff. But she likes spending time with us, right? She brought me soup when I was sick, and she helped you with the flood upstairs. Yeah, she does. It's just complicated right now. Noah studied his father's face with the unsettling perceptiveness kids sometimes showed. Are you sad about something, Papa? Not sad exactly, just thinking about some grown-up stuff. Is it about Ms. Evie? Malik knelt down to his son's level. Why would you think that? Because you get a different look on your face when someone says her name, like you're happy and worried at the same time. 7 years old, and already understanding emotions that adults struggled to name. Sometimes, Malik said carefully, people care about each other but have problems they need to work out. Like when me and Tyler had that fight about the baseball cards, but we still wanted to be friends. Something like that. Did you and Ms. Evie have a fight? Not exactly a fight, more like, we're trying to figure out if we can be friends when we want different things. Noah considered this. What different things? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that the woman he's growing attached to might be part of the reason they have to move? That sometimes people you care about have jobs that hurt the people they love? Just different ideas about what's best, Malik said finally. But whatever happens between me and Ms. Evie, it doesn't change anything about you and me, okay? We're a team, no matter what. Noah hugged him fiercely. I know, Papa, but I hope you and Ms. Evie figure it out. I think she makes you smile more. At 2 p.m., Malik sat in Dennis's cluttered office, waiting for bad news. He didn't have to wait long. The property ownership is changing hands, Dennis said without preamble. New investors, new management company, new plans for the building. Malik felt his stomach drop. What kind of plans? Renovation, modernization, market rate adjustments, the usual. And the current tenants? Will receive proper notice as required by law. 60 days for month-to-month leases, end of lease term for everyone else. 60 days. 2 months to find a new home in a market where affordable apartments disappeared as fast as they were listed. What about my position? Malik asked. The new management company has their own maintenance staff. Your last day will be Friday, but they're willing to provide references. 5 days. After 2 years of keeping the building running, fixing problems, building relationships with residents who trusted him, he had 5 days. Dennis, these people. Some of them have been here for decades. Mrs. Chen is 82 years old. Where is she supposed to go? That's not really our problem, Malik. Business is business. No, it's not just business. These are people's lives. Dennis shrugged. Look, I'm sorry it worked out this way. You do good work. But times change, and we have to change with them. Malik left the office feeling like he'd been punched. The walk back to the building felt endless, his feet heavy on the familiar sidewalks. How was he supposed to tell Noah they were losing their home? How was he supposed to explain to Mrs. Alvarez that the community she'd helped build was being scattered to the wind? When he got back to the building, several tenants were gathered in the lobby, holding identical letters. The official notices had already arrived. Mrs. Chen looked up at him with confused, frightened eyes. Malik, what does this mean? They want me to leave. The young mother with the water-damaged baby clothes was crying quietly while her toddler played at her feet, oblivious to the crisis unfolding around him. I don't understand, said the elderly man from the second floor. I've never missed a rent payment. Why do they want me gone? Malik looked around at their faces. People who'd trusted him to keep them safe, to keep their building a home. People who were looking to him for answers he didn't have. They're selling to new owners who want to renovate, he said quietly. Everyone needs to be out in 60 days. The news hit the group like a physical blow. Mrs. Alvarez sank into a lobby chair, suddenly looking every one of her 62 years. 60 days, she repeated. How am I supposed to find a place I can afford in 60 days? We'll figure something out, Malik said, though he had no idea how. I'll help everyone look for new places. We'll get through this. But even as he said the words, he knew they rang hollow. In a market where affordable housing was disappearing, where landlords could choose from dozens of applications for every available unit, where first month's rent plus security deposit plus broker fees could easily cost 3 months' income, 60 days might as well have been 60 minutes. That evening, after he'd helped as many tenants as he could make sense of their notices, Malik sat Noah down for the hardest conversation of his young life as a father. Noah, we need to talk about something important. His son looked up from his homework, pencil poised over a math worksheet. Is this about the grown-up stuff you were thinking about earlier? Yeah, buddy, it is. Malik took a deep breath. We're going to have to move. Noah's face went very still. Move where? I don't know yet. We have to find a new apartment. But this is our home. I know it is, and I'm really sorry. Is it because of something I did? The question broke Malik's heart. No, Noah. This has nothing to do with you. The people who own our building sold it to new owners, and the new owners want to change things. Change them how? They want to make the apartments more expensive. Too expensive for families like us. Noah was quiet for a long time, processing information that was too complicated and unfair for a 7-year-old mind to fully grasp. What about Mrs. Alvarez and Mrs. Chen? They have to find new places too. But Mrs. Chen is really old. Moving is hard for old people. Yes, it is. And Mrs. Alvarez has all her plants on the fire escape. She's been growing that garden for years. Malik had to clear his throat before he could speak. Yeah, she has. Noah set down his pencil and looked directly at his father. This isn't fair. No, buddy, it's not fair. Can we fight it? Like in the movies when the good guys fight the bad guys? Real life is more complicated than movies. Sometimes bad things happen even when nobody is really a bad guy. What about Ms. Evie? Can she help us? The innocent question hit like a physical blow. Malik realized he'd been holding on to some small hope that Evie might find a way to stop this, might use her position to protect the people she'd grown to care about. But she'd been removed from the project. Dennis had made that clear during their meeting. Whatever report she'd submitted, it hadn't been enough to change anything. Ms. Evie tried to help, he said quietly. But sometimes, even good people can't fix things that are broken. That night, after Noah fell asleep, Malik sat at his kitchen table and made a list. Emergency contacts for all the elderly tenants. Resources for finding affordable housing. Organizations that might be able to help with security deposits or moving costs. It was a pathetically short list for such an enormous problem. His phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, his heart jumped, thinking it might be Evie. Instead, it was Tasha. Heard about the building. Noah can stay with me until you figure things out. The offer was practical, and probably necessary, but it felt like defeat. Like admitting he couldn't provide stability for his own son. He typed back, "Thanks. Let me see what I can work out first." Another message came immediately. "Don't let your pride hurt Noah. He needs stability more than he needs to live with you." The words stung because they carried truth. If he couldn't find affordable housing quickly, if they ended up in a shelter or crashing with friends, Noah would be better off with his mother's predictable schedule and comfortable apartment. But the thought of his son learning that sometimes even parents who tried their hardest couldn't keep their promises felt like failure on the deepest level. Outside his window, the building settled into its nighttime quiet. Children's voices from upstairs, the murmur of television from next door, Mrs. Alvarez's soft singing as she watered her plants. All the sounds of a community that would soon be scattered to wherever people could afford to land. Tomorrow, He would start looking for apartments and jobs and trying to rebuild a life that had been working just fine until someone decided it wasn't profitable enough. Tonight, he allowed himself to grieve for what was being lost. Friday morning found Evie sitting in Mr. Richardson's office, listening to a lecture about professional boundaries and career suicide. "I've been in this business for 30 years, he was saying, and I've never seen someone torpedo their own advancement so spectacularly. I submitted a thorough analysis that considered all relevant factors. You submitted a bleeding heart manifesto that ignored your primary responsibility to our clients. The investors wanted clear recommendations for maximum returns, not a social work project." Evie sat quietly, hands folded in her lap. The night before, she'd lain awake thinking about this conversation, preparing arguments and justifications. But sitting here now, she found she didn't want to defend herself. She was proud of the report she'd submitted. It was honest, thorough, and humane. If that made her unsuitable for advancement at Hartwell and Associates, maybe Hartwell and Associates wasn't where she belonged. "I understand you're disappointed in my work," she said finally. "Disappointed?" Richardson laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Evie, you've been flagged as having boundary issues and compromised objectivity. Do you understand what that means for your career here? I assume it means I won't be considered for partnership track. It means you're lucky to still have a job. Dennis specifically requested that you be removed from all property advisory projects. Permanently." The finality of that word settled over her like a weight. She'd known this was coming, but hearing it officially still felt like a blow. "However," Richardson continued, "you're a smart woman, and smart people learn from their mistakes. I'm willing to transfer you to our estate planning division. It's less prestigious, lower commission potential, but it's steady work with minimal client interaction. A consolation prize, a professional dead end disguised as mercy." "I need some time to think about it," she said. "You have until Monday to decide. But Evie, if you turn this down, don't expect another opportunity. Not here, and probably not anywhere else in the industry. Word travels fast in our circles." Walking back to her office, Evie felt strangely liberated. For the first time in her professional life, she'd done something purely because it was right, not because it advanced her career or pleased her supervisors. The consequences were real and potentially severe, but she didn't regret her choice. Her phone rang. An unknown number. "Ms. Hart, this is Elena Alvarez, from the building on Maxwell Street." Evie's heart jumped. "Mrs. Alvarez, how did you get my number?" "I asked around. Found someone who knew someone who worked with you." The older woman's voice was tired but determined. "We got the notices yesterday. 60 days to find new homes." The words hit Evie like a physical blow. "I'm so sorry. I know you tried, honey. Malik told us about the nice lady who was trying to help. But it wasn't enough, was it?" "No, it wasn't enough. Mrs. Chen is beside herself. She's 82 years old and doesn't understand why strangers want to force her out of the only home she has left. The family with the little ones. They're crying because they can't afford market rates anywhere else in the city." Each word felt like an indictment. Evie had tried to find a middle path, but in the end, the outcome was the same. "Mrs. Alvarez, I wish I could have done more. Maybe you still can. I don't understand. Malik lost his job too. 5 days' notice after 2 years of taking care of everyone in this building. Now he's got to find a new home and a new job while Noah watches his whole world fall apart." Evie closed her eyes, the full scope of the disaster becoming clear. "He won't ask for help," Mrs. Alvarez continued, too proud and too scared of getting hurt again. "But that little boy keeps asking when you're coming back. He doesn't understand why the grown-ups can't fix this. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to prove that not everyone with power uses it to hurt people. I want you to show up when it matters, not just when it's convenient." The challenge in the older woman's voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a request for pity or charity. This was a call to action, a chance to prove that her values meant something when the stakes were real. Where is Malik now? Probably at the building, helping people pack. That's who he is. Takes care of everyone else first. After the call ended, Evie sat in her office staring out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Malik was probably boxing up belongings and comforting neighbors while his own world collapsed around him. Noah was probably confused and scared, watching the adults fail to protect what they'd built together. She thought about the estate planning position Richardson had offered. Safe, boring work that wouldn't challenge her conscience or her assumptions. A career path that would let her avoid difficult choices and uncomfortable truths. Then she thought about Noah's bright smile and Mrs. Chen's frightened eyes and Malik's steady hands fixing problems that weren't officially his responsibility. She made her decision. Grabbing her car keys, she headed for the elevator. She had no idea what she was going to do when she got to the building, but she knew she couldn't sit in her office while the people she'd grown to care about lost everything. For the second time that week, she was choosing to do what was right instead of what was expected. This time, she was going to see it through. The building felt different when Evie arrived. The usual sounds of children playing and neighbors chatting were replaced by the hollow echo of boxes being dragged downstairs and the quiet conversations of people trying to make impossible decisions. She found Malik in Mrs. Chen's apartment, carefully wrapping the elderly woman's dishes in newspaper while she hovered nearby, directing him in a mixture of English and Chinese. "Not so tight with the teacups," Mrs. Chen was saying. "They belong to my mother." "Yes, ma'am. I'll be careful." Evie watched from the doorway as Malik handled each piece of china like it was precious. His work shirt was damp with sweat, and there were boxes stacked everywhere. But his attention to Mrs. Chen's belongings was absolute. "Ms. Evie!" Noah appeared from behind a stack of boxes, his face lighting up with genuine joy. He threw his arms around her waist before she could react. "I was hoping you'd come. Papa said you were busy with work stuff, but I knew you'd want to help." Over Noah's head, Malik looked up at her. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "I heard what happened," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." "Yeah, well." He turned back to Mrs. Chen's dishes. "It is what it is. Can I help?" "You don't need to. I want to." For a moment, they looked at each other across the cluttered apartment. Mrs. Chen watched the exchange with sharp eyes, and Noah bounced on his toes, clearly delighted that his favorite adults were in the same room. "There's a lot to do," Malik said finally. "Mrs. Chen needs help sorting what she can take versus what has to be stored or donated. Most people are in the same situation. Then let's get to work." They spent the next 4 hours moving through the building, helping tenants pack their lives into boxes that would fit in whatever new spaces they could find. Evie's business suit was completely impractical for the work, but she ignored the runs in her stockings and the dust on her skirt. In apartment after apartment, she saw the human cost of the efficiency she'd been trained to value. The young mother trying to decide which of her children's books to keep and which to leave behind. The elderly man on the second floor staring at a lifetime collection of photographs, knowing his next apartment wouldn't have wall space for all of them. Each choice felt like a small tragedy. "You're good at this," Malik said, as they took a break on the front steps. The late afternoon sun was warm on their faces, and Noah was inside helping Mrs. Alvarez sort through her kitchen supplies. "Good at what?" "Listening to people, making them feel like their problems matter." "Their problems do matter. I know that, but most people in your position don't seem to understand it." She looked at him, taking in the tired lines around his eyes, the careful way he held his shoulders like he was bracing for another blow. "Malik, I need to tell you something. I was removed from the building assessment project. The report I submitted recommended protecting current tenants, and my supervisors didn't appreciate that." "So you lost your job too?" "Not exactly. but I probably killed my chances for advancement. They offered me a different position, but it's basically professional exile." He was quiet for a long moment. "Why did you do it?" "Because it was right. Because Mrs. Chen deserves to keep her home, and Noah deserves to stay in his school, and you deserve to work for people who value what you do." "And what about what you deserve?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "You worked hard to build your career. You've got responsibilities, goals, a life that makes sense. What about all of that?" She thought about her pristine apartment, her networking dinners, the carefully constructed life that had felt so important just weeks ago. "Maybe I was working toward the wrong things. Maybe. Or maybe you're having some kind of crisis and you'll regret blowing up your life for people you barely know." The words stung because there was truth in them. How did she know this wasn't just rebellion against her mother's expectations, or attraction to Malik confusing her judgment? "You might be right," she admitted. "I don't have all the answers. But I know I can't go back to pretending that other people's suffering doesn't matter as long as the spreadsheets balance." Before Malik could respond, Noah burst through the front door. "Papa, Mrs. Alvarez wants to know if we can take some of her plants to our new place. She says they need someone to love them, and we're good at loving things." The innocent comment hit both adults like a punch. Noah didn't understand that they didn't have a new place yet, didn't know that Malik was trying to figure out how to keep him housed and fed with no job and limited savings. "We'll see what we can work out, buddy," Malik said gently. "Where are we moving anyway? You never told me." Evie watched Malik struggle for an answer that would reassure his son without lying to him. "I'm still looking at options," he said finally. "It might take a few weeks to find the right place." "Can I help look? I'm good at noticing things." "Sure, Noah. You can help." After Noah went back inside, they sat in silence for a while. The evening was settling over the neighborhood, bringing with it the sounds of families cooking dinner and children being called in from play. Normal sounds from a world that felt increasingly fragile. "He doesn't know how bad it is," Malik said quietly. "Kids are tougher than we think." "Maybe. But he's already been through his parents splitting up, adjusting to a new custody schedule, watching me work multiple jobs to make ends meet. How much resilience should one kid have to have?" The pain in his voice was raw, unguarded. Evie realized this was the first time she'd seen him without his careful composure, the steady competence he showed the world. "You're a good father, Malik. Noah knows that, even when everything else is uncertain." "Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like I'm failing him pretty spectacularly." "You're not failing him. The system is failing all of you." "The system." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You sound like someone who just discovered poverty exists." The comment was sharp enough to draw blood, and they both knew it. Evie felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. "That's not fair. Isn't it? A month ago, you were part of that system. You made good money helping rich people get richer while families like mine got pushed further to the margins. Now you want credit for having a conscience?" "I'm not looking for credit. I'm trying to help." "Help how?" "By packing boxes and feeling bad about decisions that were already made? By making yourself feel better about being part of the machine that chews people up?" The accusation hung between them like a challenge. Evie felt something flare in her chest. Not just anger, but a recognition that he was partially right. Her guilt was real, but guilt without action was just another form of self-indulgence. "You're right," she said quietly. "Helping you pack isn't enough. Feeling guilty isn't enough. If I want to actually help, I need to do something that matters." "Like what?" She stood up, brushing dust off her skirt, her mind suddenly clear. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out." She walked toward her car, leaving Malik sitting on the front steps. But as she reached the sidewalk, she heard Noah's voice calling after her. "Ms. Evie, are you leaving?" She turned to see him running toward her, his small face worried. "I have to go take care of some things, sweetie, but I'll be back." "Promise?" The word hung in the air between them, heavy with all the promises adults had made and broken, all the times children had been disappointed by people they trusted. "I promise," she said, meaning it completely. Noah smiled and ran back to the building. Over his shoulder, she could see Malik watching from the steps, his expression unreadable. Driving home, Evie's mind raced through possibilities. She had some savings, but not enough to solve everyone's housing problems. She had connections, but most of them were in the same industry that had created this situation. She had skills, but skills that had been designed to serve the wealthy, not protect the vulnerable. But she also had something else. The absolute certainty that she couldn't live with herself if she didn't try. By the time she reached her apartment, she had the beginning of a plan. Saturday morning found Evie in her apartment, laptop open, surrounded by legal documents she'd printed from free resources online. She'd been awake since 5 a.m., researching tenant rights, housing assistance programs, and legal options for displaced renters. Her phone buzzed with a call from her mother. "Evelyn, Graham called me. He's concerned that you've been avoiding him, and frankly, so am I. This isn't like you." "I'm busy, Mother." "Busy with what?" "Graham said you missed an important networking event last night. People are starting to notice your absence from social functions." Evie looked around her apartment, at the legal documents spread across her dining table, at the list of non-profit organizations she'd compiled, at the budget she'd drafted for a plan that was probably impossible. "I'm working on something important." "More important than your career? Your future?" "Evelyn, I'm starting to worry that you're having some kind of breakdown." "I'm not having a breakdown. I'm finally figuring out what matters. And what matters is throwing away everything you've worked for to play social worker." The dismissive tone was so familiar, so much a part of the world Evie had grown up in, that it felt like hearing a language she'd once spoken fluently but no longer understood. What matters is not being the kind of person who destroys families for profit. Destroys families? Darling, you're being dramatic. Business is business. If these people can't afford to live where they want to live, they need to adjust their expectations. These people have names, Mother. They have children and jobs and community connections. They're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. Of course they're not, but that doesn't mean you need to sacrifice your own future to save them. There are organizations that handle these sorts of problems. What organizations? What help? I've spent all morning researching, and there isn't nearly enough assistance available for the number of people who need it. There was silence on the other end of the line. "Evelyn," Marianne said finally, "I'm going to say this once, and I hope you listen. You are a heart. You come from a family with reputation and responsibilities. Getting involved in this kind of situation will only damage your standing in the community. People will question your judgment. Let them. You don't mean that. I do mean it. And Mother, if people in our community think helping displaced families is bad judgment, maybe I don't want their approval anymore." She hung up before her mother could respond. An hour later, she was sitting in the law library at the local university, reading everything she could find about tenant rights and housing advocacy. The students around her were young and idealistic, working on papers about social justice and public policy. They reminded her of who she might have been if she'd made different choices earlier in her life. By afternoon, she had a rough plan. It wasn't perfect, and it probably wasn't enough, but it was a start. She drove back to Malik's building to find him on the roof, checking the ventilation system one last time before his job ended. "You came back," he said, looking up from the equipment. "I promised Noah I would." "And you keep your promises?" "I'm learning to." She climbed the last few steps to join him on the roof. The view from up there was beautiful. The city stretched out in all directions, neighborhoods flowing into each other in patterns of connection and separation. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about guilt not being enough. And I want to start a foundation, something that helps families displaced by development, emergency housing assistance, legal advocacy, connections to affordable units. It's not a perfect solution, but it's better than nothing. Malik studied her face. That sounds expensive. I have some savings, and I know people who might be willing to invest if they understood the scope of the problem. People like your ex-boyfriend, Graham? She laughed, surprising herself. God, no. Graham would probably suggest the displaced families just buy their own buildings. But there are people in my network who have consciences buried under all that privilege. Maybe it's time to dig them up. And what about your career? I'll figure something out. There are other firms, other ways to use financial skills. Maybe working for an organization that actually helps people instead of just helping rich people get richer. They stood quietly for a moment, looking out over the neighborhood that had become the center of both their worlds. There's something else, Evie said. I want to offer you a job. A job. Property manager for the foundation. Someone who understands what families need, who has experience maintaining affordable housing, who actually cares about the people living in the buildings. Malik turned to look at her directly. You're serious. Completely serious. The pay won't be great at first, but it's steady work doing something that matters. And Noah could stay in his school while we figure out permanent housing solutions. Evie. He shook his head. You can't just solve my problems because you feel guilty about your job. I'm not trying to solve your problems. I'm trying to solve a bigger problem, and I need someone with your skills and values to help me do it. What if this foundation idea doesn't work? What if you can't raise enough money or find enough housing or convince people to help? Then we'll have failed trying to do something worthwhile instead of succeeding at something horrible. He was quiet for a long time, his hands resting on the roof railing. Noah would love the idea of you sticking around, he said finally. What about you? I think. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I think I'd like to find out what it means to build something, instead of just maintaining what other people created. So you'll consider it? I'll consider it. But Evie, if we do this, we do it right. No shortcuts, no compromises that hurt the people we're supposed to help, and no using this as an excuse to avoid dealing with the real issues between us. What real issues? He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes serious. The fact that we come from different worlds. The fact that this attraction between us might be based more on novelty and guilt than on actual compatibility. The fact that Noah's already attached to you, and if this doesn't work out, he's the one who gets hurt. The honesty of it took her breath away. No polite deflection. No attempt to make things easier than they were. You're right about all of that, she said. But maybe the only way to find out if we can make this work is to try, carefully, honestly, with Noah's well-being as the priority. And if we try and it doesn't work, then we'll handle it like adults who care about each other and want what's best for everyone involved. Malik was quiet for another long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. That's quite a risk you're proposing. All the best things are risky. Is that what this is? One of the best things? Evie looked at him, really looked at him. The strong hands that fixed problems with patience and care. The eyes that saw people as individuals instead of statistics. The steady presence that made a 7-year-old boy feel safe in an uncertain world. I think it could be, she said quietly, if we're both willing to work for it. Below them, the sounds of the neighborhood continued. Children playing, music from open windows, the ordinary life of a community that was about to be scattered but was still, for now, home. There's one more thing, Malik said. If we do this, the foundation, the job, whatever this is between us, I need you to understand something. I'm not a project to be fixed, or a way to prove your good intentions. I'm just a man trying to be a good father and build a decent life. If that's not enough for you, if you need me to be your redemption story or your walk on the wild side, then we should stop this now. The words were said gently, but they carried the weight of every time he'd been misunderstood, every assumption people had made about who he was and what he wanted. You're not a project, Evie said. You're the first person I've met who made me want to be better than I was. Not different, not more interesting, just better. And you're the first person who made me think that maybe trusting someone with power doesn't automatically mean getting hurt. They stood there on the roof as the sun began to set. Two people from different worlds who had found something real in the space between their differences. So, what happens now? Evie asked. Now we go downstairs and tell Noah that you're staying around for a while. Then we figure out how to save Mrs. Chen's apartment, and Mrs. Alvarez's garden, and everyone else's home. And after that, we see if two people who care about each other can build something that lasts. Hand in hand, they walked toward the roof access, ready to face whatever came next together. 6 months later, Evie stood in the small office space she'd rented for the Maxwell Housing Foundation, looking at a wall map covered with pins marking every family they'd helped find stable housing. It wasn't enough. There were still too many people struggling, too many families forced to choose between rent and food. But it was a beginning. Ms. Evie, Noah burst through the office door, backpack flying behind him. Papa said we could stop by and see the new place before we go home. And what do you think? She asked, kneeling down to his level. I think it's perfect. Small enough to feel cozy, but big enough for all the important work you're doing. Over Noah's head, Malik appeared in the doorway. 6 months of steady work had eased some of the tension from his shoulders, and his smile came easier now. How was the meeting with the city council? He asked. Better than expected. They're interested in partnering on the pilot program for affordable housing preservation. It's not everything we wanted, but it's progress. Progress counts. It does. Noah was already exploring the office, checking out the desk where Evie worked, and the bulletin board covered with thank you notes from families they'd helped. He stopped in front of a framed photograph, the building on Maxwell Street as it used to be, before the renovations that had displaced everyone. I miss our old place sometimes, he said quietly. Evie and Malik exchanged glances. The transition hadn't been easy for any of them, but especially not for Noah, who'd had to leave the only home he remembered. What do you miss most? Evie asked gently. Mrs. Alvarez's plants on the fire escape, and the way Mrs. Chen always had candy in her purse, and how Papa knew everyone's names and everyone trusted him to fix things. Papa still fixes things, Malik said, just for more people now. I know, and I like our new apartment. It's just different. Their new place was in the same neighborhood, close enough to keep Noah in his school and maintain some community connections. It was smaller than their old apartment, but it was theirs for as long as they needed it. One of the benefits of Evie's foundation owning the building. Different isn't always bad, Evie said. Sometimes different is just different. Noah considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd learned to adapt to changes beyond his control. Ms. Evie, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you and Papa going to get married? The question hung in the office air, innocent and direct in the way only children could manage. Evie felt her cheeks flush, and she could see Malik trying not to smile. Why do you ask? Because you spend a lot of time together, and you both take care of me, and sometimes I see you holding hands when you think I'm not looking. You're very observant, Malik said. Mrs. Patterson says observation is a scientific skill. So are you? Evie looked at Malik, remembering all the conversations they'd had about taking things slowly, about making sure their relationship was real and lasting before involving Noah too deeply. But the truth was, somewhere in the past 6 months of building the foundation together, of navigating the challenges of displacement and housing and new beginnings, they'd become a family in all the ways that mattered. "We're talking about it," she said carefully. "Good," Noah said, apparently satisfied with that answer. "Because I like the way things work when we're all together, like we're a team." "We are a team," Malik said. "Whatever else happens, we're a team." Later that evening, after they'd picked up takeout from Noah's favorite restaurant and eaten dinner around Evie's kitchen table, after Noah had fallen asleep reading in the living room, Malik and Evie sat on her small balcony watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. "He's right, you know," Malik said quietly, "about us being a team. I know. And he's right about the other thing, too. I have been thinking about it." Evie turned to look at him, her heart picking up speed. "Have you reached any conclusions?" "A few." He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I love the life we're building together. I love watching you fight for families like mine. Love seeing Noah flourish with 2 parents who adore him. Love waking up knowing that we're doing work that matters. But, no buts, just, are you sure this is what you want? Not just for now, while the foundation is new and exciting, but for the long term? When the work gets routine, when Noah hits his teenage years and decides he hates us both, when we're old and boring and dealing with ordinary problems instead of saving the world?" Evie thought about the question seriously. 6 months ago, her life had been predictable and polished and empty. Now it was complicated and uncertain and full of meaning. "I'm sure," she said, "not because it's exciting or different, but because it feels like home. You and Noah and this work we're doing together. It feels like the life I was meant to have. Even when your mother still refuses to speak to you. Especially then." Malik reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "In that case," he said, "I think we should make it official." "Official how?" Instead of answering, he pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "Malik," she breathed, "I know it's not traditional. We're doing everything backwards, building a life together before proposing, taking care of other people's problems while figuring out our own. But I also know that I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. And I want Noah to have a mother who loves him as much as I do. And I want to build something lasting with someone who understands what really matters." He opened the box to reveal a simple solitaire ring, elegant in its lack of pretension. "Evelyn Hart, will you marry me?" She looked at the ring, at his hopeful face, at the life they'd built together from the ashes of her old assumptions and his careful guardedness. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Of course, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she could hear Noah's soft breathing from inside the apartment, could see the lights of the neighborhood where they'd first met, could feel the solid weight of a future built on love and shared purpose. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the life that had chosen her. And for the first time in her 29 years, that felt like exactly enough.